Well, good evening, everyone. Nice to see such a chipper bunch this evening. You know, this is pretty good. Welcome. This is the regular Board of Education meeting for Monday, August 28th, 2017. So again, welcome to everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being here. We'll get started. We're already a few minutes late, so we'll see if we can't catch up. And so I think the first order of business will be recitation of the vision statement, and that is that every school will be a thriving school that prepares every student to graduate from high school, college, career, and community ready. Okay, the first order of business, or the next order of business, is the recognition resolution, and I'll see if I can't take care of that. So tonight, we would like to recognize 6 MMSD elementary schools for being awarded the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction Bronze Awards package for implementing a culturally responsive, multi-level support system for our students. So, welcome. We should welcome everyone. Now, these 6 exemplary schools represented tonight by their principals are Falk, Franklin, Glendale, Lindbergh, Mendota, and Thoreau Elementary Schools. And so I will read the resolution. Whereas 6 Madison Elementary Schools have been awarded the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction's Bronze Award package for having implemented a culturally responsive, multi-level system of support for improved student outcomes. Whereas the Recognized Schools program focuses on expanding, refining, and sustaining implementation of the new multi-level schools support system. Along with Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction's mission, this program helps schools and districts create equitable and responsive systems for all students. Whereas the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction provides support by recognizing our district's ongoing effort to create a more culturally responsive and culturally comprehensive community for all students. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Madison Metropolitan School District Board of Education recognizes and congratulates Falk, Franklin, Glendale, Lindbergh, Mendota, and Thoreau Elementary Schools for receiving the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction's Bronze Awards package and their continuous commitment to equity and outcomes for all MMSD students. Be it further resolved, this statement be permanently imprinted in the Board of Education minutes for the meeting of August 28, 2017. Congratulations to each of these schools, their principals and school staff, and the students. And one last word, please. Congratulations to each of these schools, their principals and school staff, and to the students who have made this support system a possibility, and for the good work while implementing MMSD's strategic framework. We wish your schools the best moving forward. Thanks much.
Okay. This will be good. 1, 2, 3. That's wonderful.
Might have to switch around your resolution. Make sure you get the right one.
You don't have to start with me and Carletta, you can hold Just, you don't have to shake mine, I'm not a board member. We have some awkward. I'm hoping so I have to drive to Kenosha afterwards at 7:30.
Okay, all right, let's get this done.
Okay. All right, we'll continue right on here today and keep moving. Our next item on the agenda, public appearances. And as usual, we have veteran public appearance, people that's speaking. So I don't have to talk much about the rules. They're well aware of them. So our first speaker tonight will be Dale Underbaki, and Dale will be followed by Jim Welsh. Please come forward and welcome, Dale.
Good evening. Tonight's agenda includes the renewal of our at-risk policy. I want to thank the board and district leadership for your interest and attention to the needs of our most vulnerable learners over the last year. But over the last week, I found my thoughts returning to James' comments from last week's IMA charter discussion. His statements emphasized our commitments to students on the margins of our student delivery service delivery system. He provided insight into his personal journey as an African-American Madisonian and emphasized the importance of listening to the voices of the Black experience. He referenced decades of policy talk without meaningful evidence of a progressive walk to heal our achievement scars. James put a spotlight on the perspective gap between thinking about versus living the African-American experience. The next day's State Journal describes his testimonial as an impassioned plea. I read it more as our call to action. How many of us in this auditorium can personally relate to the at-risk experience? Have we acknowledged the differences between the learning, the trusting, the dreaming of students who are at risk compared to those who are not at risk? These aspects of the human experience cannot be standardized. These components of reaching for a North Star need to be personalized and customized for each at-risk learner. If we are committed to change, we need to ensure our at-risk plan evolves from critical insights into the realities of the at-risk experience. If done with fidelity, our at-risk plan will require us to first listen and learn what is needed before selecting interventions from a toolkit. We must use this opportunity to create a systemic lens through which we can interrupt our tradition of at-risk failures. We now have the statistics from the identification phase of our at-risk plan. After reviewing these numbers and comparing them with the achievement statistics in our annual report, I find myself wondering if the shape and context of our MTSS pyramid accurately reflects the true impact of Tier 3 learners on our strategic framework. I believe these outcomes reinforce the need for customized interventions that are created and refined through the filters of the at-risk experience. The prerequisite to achievement is engagement, not only for our students, but also for ourselves. I continue to advocate for an at-risk plan that will create in us an impatience and intolerance for any programming or intervention which fails to result in ongoing, measurable progress for those who fall outside the margins of our service delivery continuum. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Mr. Welsh?
Thank you. I'm Jim Welsh, and I'm with the Natural Heritage Land Trust. We're a local nonprofit organization that helps protect great places in the Dane County area. Tonight on your agenda is the opportunity for you to make a contribution to help us to acquire some wonderful woodlands at Lakeview Elementary School to add to the school forest. Property we're working to acquire is a special place and deserves to be added to the school forest. It contains some of the biggest unprotected trees around the school, and if it's not protected, it will be developed this coming winter. It's not a lot of land, but it's going to have a big impact on the students at the school. If you haven't seen the school forest in action, it's worth the trip. Many of the students who attend Lakeview live in apartments, so they don't have yards, they may not have access to parks and things like that. The school forest provides that. So the students are out there planting trees, growing vegetables, tapping maple trees. They use the woods for math and art and science, and they get physical education, maintaining trails and things like that. And we know, I think, that being able for students to have that daily physical connection with nature is so important. Benefits them in many ways. I think research demonstrates better academic performance, enhanced attention, improved behavior, and increased enthusiasm. And we see that when we have the kids lead our donors on trips at the school forest. The kids have inspired our donors incredibly, and our donors in turn recognize what the students will take from their wonderful experience in the school forest into the future and help future generations make better decisions about our planet and the care of our Earth. So I'm proud to report that thanks to all the generous support from our donors in the community, we're more than 80% to our fundraising goal, and the contribution from the school district would help us reach that goal and acquire the property this fall. We have gotten donations from businesses, individuals, foundations, people who live near the school, people who were teachers. I think they all understand the importance of nature in children's lives. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to collaborate with the school district, and we hope we can bring this project to a successful conclusion and do our part to help implement the vision of the school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our public speaking for tonight, and we'll continue to move on. And the next item on the agenda, approval of minutes. And I'll move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the regular meeting dated June 26, 2017.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Advisory vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, board president's announcements and reports is next on the agenda. And Amadou Chroma, a very talented and creative student entering his senior year at La Follette High School, won the silver medal in photography at the National NAACP Afro-Academic, Cultural, Technological, and Scientific Olympics competition on July 21st in Baltimore, Maryland. He was presented with this honor at the award ceremony held this last month on Sunday, July 23rd. In addition to the silver medal, he will receive a $1,500 scholarship award and a Samsung computer tablet. Thank you for positively representing our school district, and congratulations to Amadou. We wish you the very best at next year's competition and in your future endeavors. We would also like to recognize and show our appreciation for the 100 Black Men of Madison for hosting this year's 23rd annual Back to School celebration that took place August 12th, which helps our low-income families obtain backpacks and school supplies. Over the past 22 years, this organization has filled more than 32,000 backpacks with school supplies. This year, these services were available to more than 2,000 economically disadvantaged youth and their families. The work that 100 Black Men of Madison does highly benefit our students, families, and strengthens our district community as a whole. Thank you to 100 Black Men of Madison. And that concludes President's announcements and reports. We'll move into Superintendent's announcements and reports, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Cheatham.
All right, thank you, James. I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. It's a fun and busy time of year, start of school. Last week we welcomed our new teachers, brand new teachers to the profession, as well as new teachers to the district, but not new to the profession, which was wonderful. And today our entire staff returned to school. And by all the reports, including some of the principals that you saw this evening, it was a really wonderful welcome back day today. So if you see a teacher, welcome them back. We've been busy getting all of the details squared away for the start of school year. Fill rates for hiring are looking really strong. Facilities should be ready. All signs point to yes. The finishing touches are being put on the East Theater and Jefferson, which we're really excited about. Enrollment went extraordinarily well this season, meaning online enrollment, just as smooth as it's ever been since I've been here. And as you mentioned, James, there have been multiple back-to-school activities like the one that the Hunter Blackman put on the other week, which have all been wonderful. We're very thankful for all the positive energy as we head into another strong school year. And at this time of year, we always update the strategic framework. It's not a rewrite, it's just a kind of a refresh to make sure that we're clear on what actions we want to take in the year ahead. We're headed, as you know, into the 5th year of our strategic framework. For us, that means solidifying the foundation that we've built these past 4 years, and it means leveraging all that we've been doing for positive classroom impact. That's what we're after. We want to build stronger relationships between teachers and students, especially students of color, so that we can help them delve into deeper learning experiences. So that's what we're after. I'm going to give you all a little tutorial on the strategic framework for a second. This is more for the public than anyone, because this does not change. Our vision remains the same. We want every child to graduate ready for college, career, and community. As you'll remember, a couple of years ago, we fully fleshed out this vision in partnership with our community to better understand the skills and abilities that we want every child to graduate with. We want them to have mastery of content, absolutely, but we also want them to have the interpersonal skills, the confidence, the cultural competence to be successful in life after high school. And as a reminder, we have 3 major goal areas in our strategic framework. When we originally wrote the strategic framework and landed on these goals with our school board, we designed the 3 goals to intentionally kind of counterbalance one another. The first goal is all about making sure that every child is on track to graduate. The second goal is about having access to a challenging and well-rounded education. And the third is about the positive school climate that we want every student, staff member, and family member to experience. We're not satisfied until every child is making progress on all of these goals. That's what we think good looks like. In addition to setting goals, we defined a set of core values. It was never meant to be an exhaustive list of everything that we believe is important for our school district, but at the time that we wrote it, these were the core values that we thought were most important. These rose to the top. A couple of years ago, we added the 5th core value, a value of establishing a culture of excellence with equity, which is a nod to that idea of targeted universalism that we've been discussing with the board for the past year or so. We want every child to be held to high expectations, but we want to give them what they need as an individual to meet and exceed those high expectations. And of course, our theory of action has remained stable these past 4 years. We believe that we have to establish a highly disciplined way of working in our schools. If we're to raise student achievement and narrow and close achievement gaps, we do that through the school improvement planning process. While every school plan is a little different and unique, we want to function as one big community of learners, all striving to teach in a way that is culturally responsive and linguistically responsive. And then the third component of our strategy is that while schools are doing the work of teaching the children, the central office has a very important role. And our role is to identify and tear down institutional barriers. It's also to make sure that our schools have the tools and resources to get the job done. And we identified, when we started, 5 priority areas. Those are listed here. These are the areas where we thought we were lacking in tools and resources and where we thought there were significant institutional barriers in place. And we've been trying to get after those barriers and resources and tools in the past 4 years. Over these past 4 years, we have every year identified a system-wide, district-wide focus area, an area where we believe every school across our entire district needs to work on together. In the first year, we focused on strengthening shared leadership, which we believe is a critical ingredient to success. In the second year, we kind of ratcheted it down from school leadership to teacher teaming. What does it look like when a teacher team works together to make great decisions on behalf of their students? In year 3, we took on professional learning and specifically individualized professional development for individual teachers through instructional coaching. We wanted to strengthen the way we support teachers. In year 4, we decided that we had to work on strengthening parent partnership, that while we were getting better at leadership, teacher teaming, supporting teachers, that we couldn't be successful without pulling parents into the equation in a meaningful way. That's what we focused on last year, and in year 5, the year we're heading into, we're focusing on culturally responsive teaching. We believe that we are in a place where we can leverage all of those ways of working to guarantee a positive classroom impact. So that's the focus for this upcoming year. As a way to demonstrate that focus and bring some student voice into the room, I wanted to share with you a little video. This is one of our own students, Eden Foster, who stood in front of about 250 principals, teacher leaders, and other school leaders this past May, and talked to us about what she believes the student-teacher relationship needs to look like. So I'll let you go ahead and hear directly from Eden.
So as you've heard, my name is Eden Foster, and I'm a junior at Memorial High School. Now you may be wondering why a student is up here, and frankly, in the back of my head, I'm wondering the same thing. As you can probably assume, for me to be telling a room full of administrators what to do can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but I will do my best. I'm honored to have been chosen to speak by Superintendent Cheatham on behalf of the TEAM program. So TEAM is a high school level education and scholarship program through UW-Madison School of Education. And TEAM aims to increase diversity in the MMSD teaching workforce. So we are a group of minority students from low-income backgrounds with an interest in teaching and education. And we work with names like John Diamond and Gloria Lassen-Billings, so it really is a privilege to be in TEAM. Now, I joined TEAM freshman year because, why else? My mother told me to. But what I didn't realize was that TEAM would end up shaping the way that I view myself as an empowered leader, which allows me to do things like speaking in front of you all today. But it would also shape the way that I view education and what makes a teacher truly great. Now, before I dive into great teaching, I'm going to tell a story, and this is where it's going to get personal. When I was in 8th grade, I fell into the deep, dark pit that is depression and anxiety. I started missing school, I wasn't doing my assignments, my grades were lowered, and worst of all, I felt as if no one understood. My history teacher noticed this, and she asked if I wanted to talk at lunch. And this is something that I'll never forget. As I sat there and I started explaining what was going on, with tears forming in my eyes, she wrapped me in a hug, and she said, "You are not alone, you are loved, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you through this." Now, in that moment, something changed. She didn't just see me as my worst grades, or my missing assignments, or my lower test scores, but she saw me as a full, complex human being with struggles outside of class. She actively listened to me and pursued me, and she helped me to get my grades up every single day. And because of that, she became my role model, and she is who inspired me to become a teacher. And because of that, she shaped my life. My history teacher is just one example of great teaching. And I could talk about curriculum or pedagogy or discipline practices, but today I'm just going to focus on one thing, and that is building strong teacher-student relationships. After a full year of research in TEAM, we found that relationships were the most important factor in great teaching. Now, there are three things that I think that students want from teachers to foster strong relationships. The first is great teachers value the importance of their role in students' lives. I always hear students say, it just seems like my teacher just doesn't care. Now, teachers have an immense role in shaping the future. They see their students every single day, so what they say truly matters. With my history teacher, even that simple gesture changed my life. Great teachers know what and how they teach can change the future. And they see that when their students become adults and achieve great things, and they have a sense of pride. My second point is that teachers must be willing to go out of their comfort zone. And this happens every day, I'm sure. Teachers can sometimes be afraid of knowing everything that is going on in their students' lives because it may be too painful. But as students, we wish teachers knew why we couldn't go to class or why we missed an assignment. For example, if a student wasn't paying attention in class or they harped at a teacher, they may be punished or shamed without an explanation. But if the teacher has a relationship with the student, they may discover that the student wasn't paying attention because they had no food to eat last night, or they harped because they had to work a super long shift. And these are often minority students who are disproportionately disciplined, which I'm sure you're all aware of. But we can do better. This is only possible with a connection and a trusted relationship between the teacher and the student. And my third point is that teachers must be learners too. Teachers are seen by students as a wealth of knowledge, and they are supposed to teach information and education, but they could be missing the opportunity to learn about or from students. What if teachers ask students to teach them about their cultures and experiences or passions? If their roles are reversed, then the students will feel empowered and they'll have a stronger relationship and connection with both their classmates and their teachers. Teachers could also be unaware of their implicit biases and how that affects their practices. But if teachers take the role of the learner about their biases, then their worldview will be changed, and therefore their pedagogy will be changed. Teachers must learn about their own teaching. Good teachers want feedback. They want accountability for their teaching practices. And most importantly, they want the student input. And as a student, I can't stress this enough. So what if teachers ask their students what they wish their teacher knew? What if they ask what works or what doesn't in the classroom? These factors all create a stronger connection between teachers and students, but more importantly, they make teachers into role models and inspirations, not just suppliers of education. Now, I'm critical of teaching and education because I am a product of it, but also because I'm signing myself up for it. Now, before I share a quote that I find meaningful, let me just say that I am aware that teaching can be difficult, draining, and it has a steep learning curve. But I'm also aware that it is one of the most important jobs in the world. As the inspirational writer William Arthur Ward said, "The mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, but the great teacher inspires." And because I have been inspired by great teachers and administrators like all of you, I want to inspire my future students as well. Thank you.
I know. Isn't that nice? Yeah, I wanted to share that with you because it was a wonderful way to end our school year last year, and it's a great way to start the school year this year. Eden's comments remind us of the powerful role that teachers can play as allies to their students. And this year we want to make sure you know, and we've talked about this before, that we want to make sure to raise the voices of students of color, teachers, and teachers of color. We're going to use this time during the superintendent's announcements throughout the year to do so. So we look forward to doing that later this year. To guide this work, the work that we're doing on culturally responsive teaching this year, we are working with the National Equity Project. We'll continue working with them, but guided by the work of Zaretta Hammond. And each of you received, I think, a copy of her book sometime in the last month. I encourage you to read it. We'll all be reading it and studying it together this year. Zaretta states in her book that, I'm going to quote from it for a second, "Many children start school with small learning gaps, but as they progress through school, the gap between African American and Latino and white students grows because we don't teach them how to be independent learners. Specifically, we underestimate what disadvantaged students are intellectually capable of doing. We postpone more challenging and interesting work until we believe they've mastered the basics. And by focusing only on low-level basics, we deprive students of a meaningful or motivating context for learning and practicing higher-order thinking skills. And the end result is what she calls an epidemic of dependent learners." We're learning together how to reframe the achievement gap to better understand what keeps it in place. This year, we're going to be focusing on what it means to create a learning partnership with students. That's because we believe that with rapport and alliance, teachers develop cognitive insight, right? This isn't fluff. Developing relationship isn't fluff. It gives you the cognitive insight to be able to meet students' needs and challenge them academically. And as you've heard us talk about a lot, strong relationships serve as the foundation. If there isn't authentic trust in the classroom, we know that students won't give us the permission to challenge them. And that is what we're asking them for. They won't be able to bring their guard down and learn from us because deep learning, as you know, is always about making yourself vulnerable. And there are specific skills and strategies, which we talked a little bit about at the end of your board retreat this past June, starting with trust generation. And you can see some of the key concepts that Zaretta highlights as it relates to trust generation, that we all need to make ourselves selectively vulnerable. That means sharing things about our own experience, maybe our school experience, to find connection with our students, to find what we have in common, which includes our common adversaries, to find what we are concerned about, and to demonstrate our competence, which builds trust. We actually, before I leave this, in these first weeks of the school year, we're encouraging teachers, and they're all talking about this as we speak in their Welcome Back Week, to find ways to build trust. But obviously, it's something that doesn't end in the first weeks of school. It needs to be carried throughout the school year. And we'll come back to the board and report out to you how that work is going as we continue to deepen our understanding of what it means to connect with our students, and particularly students of color. In addition to the district-wide work that we're doing, which is going to show up in school improvement plans and our professional learning all year long, we will continue to do the work that central office needs to do this upcoming year. The only significant part of the framework that gets updated each year are the specific next steps in each of those 5 priority areas. I will not go through all of those with you right now, but I'll just highlight a few. As you know, this year that we're heading into, we're launching the first ever personalized pathway at all 4 of our comprehensive high schools. We're going to continue to work with our African American Youth Strategic Council and have them help guide our work on deepening our connection with students and working with them in ways that are culturally responsive. We will be working on strengthening the early literacy focus area this upcoming year at the elementary level, as well as working intensively with middle schools, which includes more leadership coaching for our principals and leadership teams. We'll be working on strengthening the 9th grade on track process. All of these areas are places where the board has made some significant investments. And we'll be talking with you actually soon at next board meeting, I think in September, about what we've learned from community schools. And we'll think about to the extent to which we'll be expanding that model. So lots coming up in the year ahead. And I'll end with highlighting that we'll continue working with the Teachers of Color Advisory Group. They shared with us a very powerful set of recommendations. Those recommendations are actually listed in the strategic framework itself. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them, please do. But we will bring them here to a board meeting later this year so you can hear directly from that group and the actions we're taking as a result. One of the recommendations that the Teachers of Color Advisory Group made was to create opportunities for staff members who are interested to deepen their knowledge of how to facilitate dialogue on racial equity and how to deepen that work system-wide. And as a result, we're offering a new opportunity for up to 15 staff members this year to be the first cohort of what we're calling Equity Fellows. These will be up to 15 teachers who want to learn how to facilitate racial equity discussions themselves. They'll help guide our work as an entire school district. We're really excited about it, and we'll be announcing that opportunity as the school year gets kicked off. So more to come on that. Last but not least, I want to remind you, while we're doing the good work of implementing year 5 of our strategic framework, we'll be working with you to write the next one, which I'm actually very excited about. I think it will rejuvenate me as a leader. This process will be led by us. We will kick it off in October at the board retreat. That will then lead into a period of listening and learning. We'll come back together, reflect on what we heard, scope out what we think the bones of the next strategic framework ought to be, go into a planning phase, and if all goes as planned, we'll exit this process in August with a new strategic framework that'll lead us in the years to come. And I will leave it at that. Oh, actually, one last thing. A reminder that central office is deployed in the first days of school to support schools in whatever way they need. There are quite a few community leaders who like to be deployed to greet children and families on those first couple of days of school, and I'll send a reminder to the board if you'd like to participate in greeting students and families on the first days. We would love to have you. Like I said, it's exciting. It's fun to see those fresh, shiny faces on the first couple days. All right, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Here's to a good school year.
Any questions for Superintendent? Strategic framework, which we'll be discussing in quite a detail in the days to come. Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks again. We'll continue to move on here, and next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I'll move that the Board of Education adopt and approve all the motions set forth in Section 6 of the electronic agenda prepared for the August 28th, 2017 regular school board meeting, exactly as said motions are written. Now, by voting affirmatively on this motion, a board member expresses his or her affirmative vote on each of the motions consolidated hereby, subject to any express separations that have been made by any member of the board. Get a second to the motion. Moved. Yes, I moved it. So second? Dean second. Okay, so move second. Questions, comments, separations?
I'd like to separate 6.7 Alignment Nashville and 6.13
6.7?
6.7, yeah.
Okay.
And 6.13 JB Safety.
6.13. Okay, 6.7, 6.13. Anyone else? Nikki?
6.15, I believe, is the computer system.
6.15? Okay. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Laura, your advisory vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, motion carries 7-0. And now on to the separations. The first one would be 6.7, I guess. Mr. Merkis.
This is a contract for approximately $50,000 for consulting on scheduling for our secondary schools, both our high schools and our middle schools. And my understanding is that there's both in-person things and some distance consulting going in support with that. Kind of have three issues with this. One is I understand that there's a working relationship with the people involved here. But I don't think this rise, and that there was some effort to contact other people who might be interested in doing this work with our district. I don't think the efforts and the relationships rise to the sole source contracting standards that this district should have as a public entity. I think that those are very important. So that's number one. Number two is that the Nashville, particularly at the high school level, and I really don't know much about their middle school scheduling, though the options around middle schedule and the challenges around middle school scheduling are not as great as they are around high school scheduling, particularly when we're integrating experiential learning, work-based experiences, things like that, which are very difficult and challenging. At the high school level, the Nashville model is wall-to-wall pathways, which presents very, very different challenges than what, for at least the next 2 or 3 years, we will have in our high schools, and perhaps beyond, which is not wall-to-wall pathways. Secondly, the Nashville high schools are very, very tracked. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do as a district is get away from tracking. You know, we don't call it tracking, but we certainly have kind of trends in students taking courses that some students taking certain courses together and others not. And so I think that, and scheduling is part of that. Scheduling is a large part of disrupting tracking and the segregations that occur with tracking. And so for these two reasons, I don't find the Nashville experience to be something that I think is going to be particularly helpful. And then third is that Alignment Nashville is literally a case study by the United States Chamber of Commerce for how the business community can dictate education reform in a city. Literally a case study by the Chamber of Commerce. And if any portion of this payment is going to support Alignment Nashville as an organization, I don't think that is where we want to be sending our tax dollars. That's an ideological piece, and some may or may not join me on that. But I think the first two things are serious enough to give one pause.
Okay, Nick?
My issue with the Nashville contract is that I believe in diversity, I believe in affirmative action. This, because of the low number of individuals involved, 11, they are not bound by our affirmative action policy. And I feel that if we're going to work on diversity, if we're going to work on minority businesses, if we're going to work on helping individuals of all races to have a waiver because they don't fit our affirmative action policy, I just don't think that's a good fit when we have local businesses who can.
Okay, response, Superintendent?
Yeah, thank you. I mainly, I'm trying to think, I should have written all three of your things down, TJ, but when it comes to procurement, I think you all understand that our team carefully reviews those sole source waivers, and we don't take them lightly. So I'll share that feedback with our team, TJ, and I know we wrote in our response to you today the reasons, and which is also captured in that waiver document, that the uniqueness of the organization is essentially why it's been forwarded as a sole source, and there is a pre-existing relationship with this particular woman, Kelly Henderson, who's providing the consulting services. The work that she provides, we're not hiring her because we want the Nashville schedule or model, but because she is very skilled and knows a lot about many models when it comes to scheduling. And we have very limited internal capacity when it comes to scheduling, which is why we're going outside. The goal would be to build our internal capacity so we don't have to depend on anyone else to support us with scheduling. But as you know, we're going through a pretty major change process. And we've got some very serious barriers at the middle school level. Barriers to access, as you know, world language, AVID, intervention, and we really need to unpack the challenges of middle school scheduling as well. So I'll just say that and leave it up to you.
Yeah, I have to ask the elementary question. That is, can you explain the whole scheduling aspect? I mean, I had just reading it, I was trying to figure out what is the scheduling? Yeah, what is that really? What is the
Gosh,
scheduling?
oh my gosh,
What
have
is
you
that?
ever, you should talk to a high school person about master scheduling. It is an incredibly complex process of fitting together the puzzle pieces of where students go for classes, in what order, and what length of blocks of time. At the high school and middle school level, there are multiple kinds of schedules. So there's the traditional 50 minutes. There are multiple versions of block schedules, modified block schedules. AB, that's right. And
historically, we've done it how?
we have a traditional schedule.
A traditional
50-minute classes. And with the exception of La Follette High School, which has a
Right.
block schedule.
So we're investigating other possibilities.
Yes.
Basically, and so we feel that we need to bring this expert in because
Yeah.
they bring some skills that we don't have in the district.
Yeah, and to very specifically look at our goals and challenges to help us think about what might be the right strategies for us.
So
That's
James,
right.
maybe, I visited Sandburg earlier this year.
Yeah.
and
Please.
Yes, please.
So I visited Sandburg earlier this year to see how they're implementing some of their technology, which they're doing some incredibly exciting things with technology. They created, I think, about an hour and a half of free time essentially every day in their schedule. This is elementary, so it's actually far easier, just through creative scheduling, which let them have students write novellas and act out plays and record them and put them on the web and run. I mean, they literally created time just through creative scheduling, which I think many schools actually might like to
time
have
is a
tools
resource.
to understand how to do. But
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea how they did it, but I don't think it was straightforward. Otherwise, I would guess more schools would do it.
Now, are there any constraints like annual minutes of instruction or anything like that?
Yes.
So
There are
you
some
can create these
constraints.
schedules, but those are some of the constraints and barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, Anna.
I just have two comments. I guess I would first start with, one of my concerns is that I believe we're putting together a committee to explore what barriers exist within the middle school, our current middle school program, which are preventing us from being as successful as we would like to see for our students. So I guess my one concern then is it almost seems like we've predetermined that it's about scheduling, and I want to be cautious about that because I think there are numerous other barriers that are preventing us from being successful.
Yeah, I would agree there are numerous barriers, Anna, and the committee that started working on middle school worked all of last year. And we can resend just the kind of the outcomes, that first phase of investigation and exploration of middle school strengths and challenges. But it really stemmed from that initial phase of work. It's one aspect, but it's one really key aspect. High schools being the most important group, and that's my personal opinion because of what's happening with Pathways in the immediate future.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, and I wasn't aware that I didn't see the results from that, so I would like to see what came out of that committee.
You got it, and it's on the board calendar for this year.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it then as well.
And my other concern is I agree with TJ. I am always skeptical of business practices that are informing educational practices because historically they haven't served many of our children very well.
Laura?
Is it coming out of the Pathways budget because the changes would be only for the Pathways cohort or in the event of wall-to-wall?
No, I'm not. I don't have. Let me look. Okay. I'm not. Is it coming out of the Pathways budget, guys?
It was part of one of the priority actions that was associated with Pathways. So I don't know where that priority action budget dollars went, but it was part of one of the priority actions associated with
I would
Pathways
assume so.
professional development.
Yeah. Right.
If that
The
helps.
consent agenda, generally, we're executing on what was approved in the budget, so thank you, TJ. Correct, Cindy? All right, excellent.
Okay.
There you go, Laura.
Okay, any other questions, concerns, comments about items 6, 7, alignment Nashville Inc. contract? Okay, seeing none, Lori, advisory vote.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, I think it passed 4-3. Okay, passed 4-3. All right, next item on the agenda is 6.13, TJ.
Yeah, this is the contract with JB Safety to fulfill portions of the role as security director, particularly training, supervision, and consulting, I guess is the way to put it. And I understand that we were kind of left in a lurch and that there's difficulties due to Act 20 around hiring full-time qualified people. But this is looking more like a permanent solution than an interim solution. And I would prefer that we continue to pursue hiring rather than have a 10-month contract here. And you know, and so I'd be much more comfortable if we did a 5-month contract. And a number of reasons. Number one is I think that as a general rule, independent contracting for what has outside contracting for what has traditionally been a staff public employee position is not a good idea. Secondly, I compared the contracts for JB Security and the job description, and one of the pieces that's missing from and rightfully missing from the consulting contract is supervision and evaluation of our staff. We don't want outside contractors supervising and evaluating our staff. That makes sense. But what this does is put those, at least portions of that work, in the hands of people who are somewhat distanced from the actual work that our staff are doing. And I don't think that's a good practice. So, Dylan, I don't know if this is possible, but could I propose that this contract go through December 31st, as opposed to what we have here is a 10-month contract, which would go through, I don't have it in front of me, I don't have it pulled out, June 30th. And that along with this contract, we instruct the administration to continue searching for someone to fill this position. And if Dylan says no, then I'll just vote against it.
So I mean, I think from a technical aspect, we've kind of learned over the last few weeks about contracting that we can independently say, do X, Y, or Z, and then we go back with the contracted party and negotiate that, and we may or may not have a contract. That is my practical concern of the
that could happen, yes.
Right, of the implications also. Having done my section of getting ready for the new year, which is a lot of the safety security planning, who to call, that could leave us in the same lurch we were left in this year, except 5 days from the start of school. And so there are practical implications of it being a negotiated bargain and the other side not accepting that negotiation.
From a practical standpoint, I guess my vision was that December 1st rolls around and we don't have somebody hired, we attempt to extend this contract again, and that would be my vision of how we would handle that. We wouldn't wait till December 31st.
But that's assuming that the individual with whom we're contracting would even want a 5-year contract, and that there's not, right? So, and I mean, we're getting close to kind of negotiating in public again with our bottom line, which is always not the best place to have our bottom line stated. But there is a simple yes, but real practical concerns.
Yeah, I think we've all followed this process and seen the ups and downs of trying to hire a security person. And it's been a difficult one, and I think it's like many positions that I think there's only so many people in the pool. Right. And if you get a good one, then you know, maybe we should just move forward with that. And I think there's a lot of questions. I mean, I can agree with some of the points you're making, Mr. Merks. It's just so if we go to 5-month contract, then we get back with questions about whether or not it would even be acceptable. We're sort of starting from square one, and it's difficult in our school district in terms of security, not having a security person to lead the way. And I really don't want to have any months go by without someone at the helm, and I don't want to take that risk, especially if we have a good one. I think Mary's next, and then Mr. Loomis.
I'm all in favor of getting through the school year. I think it's incredibly disruptive. It takes staff time. The contract clearly states that there was a process. The attempts were made to hire. I think when you're talking about the schools, you're talking about people who are generally contracted for a school year. I think it'd be highly unusual to find a really top-notch qualified candidate midway through a school year. So I would not, we could actually lose this person, maybe not likely, but then we'd be in a much worse position. So I'm all in favor of the full school year contract.
Mr. Loomis?
Yeah, I think the gap filling year makes more sense to confirm it, but what happened, do we open it up again? What I didn't quite get is, do we open it up again towards the end of second semester to advertise a job for a full-time regular position at September 2018?
Well, I think this gets to TJ's initial point, which is this a permanent solution or a temporary one? And we certainly have never seen it as a permanent solution, but a very practical and good solution for the year that we're about to begin. And we want to see how it goes and explore, based on how it goes, what the potential options are for the future, which could include advertising and hiring someone in the traditional route. But we actually don't want to limit it there. To James's point, I mean, this is a very special position, the head of safety and security for a district of our size. There aren't a ton of candidates out there who meet the profile for someone in a role like this. And we want to look for multiple creative solutions to be able to get the best person to keep our school district safe. So that may very well be Dean, but I think we need to see how the school year goes and then make a decision on how we move forward in the coming months.
Anyone else? Okay, then I'll move that the Board of Education affirm past actions by the district in engaging a consultant for safety and security and approve entering into a service agreement with JB Public Safety Consulting, LLC, in an amount of $88,000 for the coordination of school safety and security during the time period of September 1st, 2017 through June 30, 2018, with funding from the 2017-18 Safety and Security Operating Budget.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any final questions or comments? Seeing none, Lori, advise the vote. Aye. All in favor? Aye. Opposition?
Nay.
Do we have more than 2 nays? Motion carried, passes 5-2. Okay, next item is Ms. Vandermeulen, 6.15.
Yes, 6.15 is the computer system for individuals who are having, I believe it's called AVIS. I'm bad with names. But this, I believe, is the computer system. And I'm all for helping students who are not achieving as well, but I'm not sure we're seeing the level of success with this particular program that we are expecting to see, and I'm afraid that it will not give as much of a benefit as possibly increased tutoring in other programs. Or did I get the number wrong?
I think you wanted 6.8, Read 180, System 44?
Yeah.
Is that what you wanted? Okay.
I said the wrong number. That is my fault, and I apologize. Thank you, TJ.
Technically, it's
That
already
passed, so then I withdraw the motion.
It's already been approved.
I withdraw my motion.
We still have to do 6.15 now since it's been separated out.
Okay, for 6.15,
I'm backwards.
you know, we can, as a board, we can still talk about your point.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I'll move that the Board of Education approve an award to Intrusion LLC, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the amount of $70,000 for Phase 2 of MMSD proprietary web-based staffing allocation tool with funding from the 2017-18 district-wide enterprise budget.
A second, and I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
Since I wasn't going to do this, but since Nikki did pull this and we are here, I'd like to, last time when we did the initial contract with these people, I encouraged those who are working closely with them to use this opportunity to create a more public and interface and transparent on the staffing allocation process, rather than only concentrating on the internal tools, but also something that can be publicly facing, and I will encourage that again.
Okay, thank you. Laura, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Now, I do want to take a minute to go to Nikki's point. Now, which number?
6.8.
6.8? 1.8?
No, 0.8, just
0.8.
Just 0.8.
Straight 8.
Okay.
Just a kind of color, isn't it?
And my issue with 6,
Okay, 6.8. Okay, so let's,
I just worry that this is a computer tool that isn't helping as much for our struggling students. I don't want to just put someone in front of a computer screen and have an easier curriculum and then have them not be able to achieve the goals they need to for the next level. And I want to make sure that they are fully prepared. And I'm not sure that the program does that.
yeah, and I think it's fair to question whether or not we're getting results from any program that we administer, so I think that's fair. We have been using Read 180 and System 44 for a while, and I, you know, so I don't know. Did you have a question?
Well, I have a comment too. I would be interested, I was just talking about this today at the event in regard to the different interventions we're using and in the efficacy around them. And we've been piloting a program around, I'll just call it Orton Gillingham, although I know I'm not supposed to call it that. But anyways, multi-sensory approach to reading instruction. And we've been doing that for several years, but we haven't really seen any data come out around whether that's effective or not. The same, I would like to look at too, you know, Read 180 and System 44 and start comparing some of these interventions and really finding out which ones are being successful. And I think it comes back to the conversation around Lexia, which was introduced as perhaps an intervention, which is now maybe school-wide at some schools K through 2. I just feel like we need to be making informed decisions about whether these interventions are being effective or not so much. So that's just an area of interest of mine.
Yeah, it just, you know, and this also, since Read 180 is before us now, which again didn't intend it to, this ties back. One thing, Nikki, is that Read 180, when done with Fidelity and System 44, I believe also, is a combination of online things and classroom activities and also, I believe, some pre-reading time in there too. I think there's 3. And then what I want to add to it, though, is that, and this ties back to the scheduling issues, is that historically in our district, pure total fidelity with Read 180 has required schedule blocks that aren't natural to our scheduling, and therefore we've kind of twisted and turned things to some degree with it. And I think this is just an example of how scheduling can be important for different activities and different classes requiring and complex, requiring different time frames for them. So,
okay, Superintendent.
Yeah, I'll just make one quick comment. Nikki, thank you for actually pulling this. Because I think it is very important. It's very much related to the comprehensive look that we're taking on middle school. Our approach to intervention, we don't believe is sufficient. TJ is right that it's not just computer time, there is some computer time, but there is teacher instruction and then small group as well. Nevertheless, we don't think we're getting it right. With middle school intervention, and that will need to be an essential component of our overall look at middle school.
All right, thank you. Anyone have any other comments on this item? All right, seeing none, then that completes our consent agenda items for tonight, and we'll move right on and head to instruction work group and turn it over to Mr. Mertz.
The instruction work group did not meet this month, but we will be meeting next month, and we have an updated advanced learner plan, as well as a new partnership with Madison College on the agenda, and the date for that is September 11th. So, that's.
All right, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, Operations Work Group, Ms. Burke.
Okay, we had one main item on the Operations Work Group held on August 14th, and that is an action item for this board, and we narrowed the changes, the proposed revisions to Charter Policy 10,000 to the ones that are needed with regards to timeline. And so those are the changes that you see set forth. And so I will move that the Board of Education approve the revisions to Board Policy 10,000, Charter Schools, as set forth in the documents prepared for the August 28th, 2017 regular board meeting to take effect immediately.
Second.
Yes.
You highlighted, and as does the memo highlight, the changes in the timeline. There's also some other changes in Section 2A4 and 2C4, which is the composition and a little bit around the process of review, which is something that we didn't discuss at the Operations Work Group. And it came up in passing, I think, and those are included in the changes here. At least the changes on the version I have in front of me.
Yeah, let me.
So I think that without having had a discussion of those, I'd like to pull back on those changes.
TJ, I think that is fair. I think that is through rejecting and not rejecting various and trying to do a compare.
It happens.
So, yes, my intention was to implement the timeline changes as directed and nothing more.
So let me offer an amendment on that, which is to not accept the changes on, I believe it's section 2A4 and C4 to revert to the previous language of policy 10,000, whatever it is. So amend the, offer that as an amendment if there's a second. Second. And I don't have any discussion except for what I just said.
Point of discussion. Dylan, can you confirm that those are the sections that were not intended for this?
That's actually just what I'm doing right now, and I actually think it is 2A.
Is it 4 or 5? It's funny there.
It's 5.
It's 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And that's because of the red
Thanks,
line,
Mary.
so I just want to.
Yeah, the red line was
hard
weird.
to, it's really hard to see.
Yeah, which was my very issue to begin with.
2A5, and is it C4 or C5? I tried to get it right.
Yes, it's A5 and C4.
The amendment should read then. Thanks for checking that, Mary.
So, yeah,
So then the
so
first
it's been-
process will be to vote on the amendment and then as amended.
Great. Is there any further discussion? No? Lori, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
And
the
then
amendment passes.
I have one more thing, which is that at the Operations Work Group, no, actually, I'm sorry, at the IMA meeting, there was some discussion around the interpretation of the charter school funding formula, which is section 6C, if I'm right on this. And there was a last-minute reinterpretation, and I think that at the Operations Work Group we decided not to tackle funding formula, which to me means that without having had that discussion, we should revert to what's been understood through 99% of the IMA process. So I would amend the policy before us by inserting the words regular student before the open enrollment amount in section 6C.
Sure, go ahead.
I was just going to on or off, but
Real loud, please.
6B, I'm sorry.
I think the funding formula requires a pretty holistic conversation, and I have a lot to say on it, which isn't noticed for tonight. So, I mean, I would hold that. I think it needs to be talked about, but I don't think this is the right moment. I think we decided to wait to
Yeah, I
have
think that was
discussion.
the consensus at the operations work group, that outside of the timeline, that those were the only changes to the charter policy that we would be considering, given the needed discussion or interest in a full discussion with regards to any other changes. So you propose the amendment?
Yeah, I guess I don't see this as a change. I see this as a clarification that there was some ambiguity in the that was found in the policy. There's some ambiguity about the meaning of the open enrollment funding amount. And so I don't see this as a change. I see this as simply confirming what's been the understanding for the 4 years I've been on the board up until last week, was the understanding of what that meant. And so I don't see this as a change. I just see this as removing the ambiguity.
Well, then I guess if you've moved it.
Yeah, I moved it. I haven't heard a second.
If
So
there's a second, there's...
It's been moved in a second. My only point is that one of the things trying to make sure we get in the habit of doing around this table is making sure we discuss things that we have decided to discuss here. I don't think this was something that any of us had on our plates for discussion tonight. So I don't know how thoroughly the board have given some thought to this, and I don't think that it would be a disservice or would hinder our long-term decision at all to put this on hold until we have a chance to think about it as a board and have the discussion later. I'm not sure. I just use the phrase of one of our board members. I'm not sure what the rush is, and so let's put it on hold and just wait and talk about this when we talk about the funding formula, the rest of the charter policy, and that's my view on it.
Okay, is there any other discussion around the amendment?
I just want to say that when this was before the operations work group, that interpretation of the charter school funding policy, charter school funding formula had not been before the board, so there was no way to anticipate it and discuss it at that time. And this is something that, again, kind of appeared out of nowhere in the last week and a half. And so that's why it hadn't been flagged before. Yeah. I mean, I mean that's.
I think it's a good point. I think that's all the reason why we should wait.
And okay, that's. Yeah, so we'll vote.
No, I think it's a good point. I think it's all the reason why we should wait.
Yeah, and I think at the work group, there are a number of people who are interested in talking about the funding formula, but that's why I don't think I will certainly not be supporting the amendment, because I think it requires a lot more discussion, a lot more background before going into it. Dean?
Yeah, I think all of us are eagerly awaiting a more thorough discussion on the charter policy, particularly given our last experience here. You're probably right on this, and I'm okay to put it in with more changes to come. And so we're probably going to do this, but I want to, instead of think I'm right, I want to know I'm right, and we'll do it when we do the whole thing all together.
Okay, so Laura, your advisory vote?
Nay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. That does not pass 2-5. Okay, so then back to the amended.
Non-amended. Yes.
Yeah, it was amended.
Yes, yep.
Amended motion. Laura, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 7-0.
And then there's no need for the it is further recommended motion because we did not modify the renewal timeline. So we won't need that motion tonight.
Okay. Next work group meeting is September 18th, and we will be posting what those agenda items are in the weeks to come.
All right, thank you, Mary. We'll continue on to other reports to the board. And the next report is the City of Madison Education Committee, and it's not September 1st, so you will have the opportunity to say.
All right, well, it's been a wonderful committee to serve on. Unfortunately, we did not have a meeting because we didn't have a quorum. So I miss you all. Our next meeting is going to be held on September 13th, 2017.
And thank you, Anna. Looking forward to seeing how that committee progresses and see if we can get more people there other than board members and staff and MMSD staff. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, thanks again, Anna, and thanks for serving on that committee. And I'm sure Nikki is just chomping at the bits to take over. And
it should be interesting.
Yes, it should be. All right. Okay, next item on the agenda, Student Senate.
We have not had a meeting, but we are planning on having one on August 30th.
August 30th. Okay. All right. Well, it must be summertime. All right. Okay, next item on the agenda, the Madison School Community Recreation MSCR Advisory Committee.
I do have something to report. There was a meeting on 5 days ago, which I did not attend. But I do have the minutes here, and one of the items discussed on the meeting was discuss ideas on how to engage the advisory committee with MSCR. And one of the bullets underneath it was attend Board of Education meetings to speak about MSCR's accomplishments and needs. Following our friend Dell's recommendations, the board is now going to go to the MSCR advisory committee meetings, and I'll bring their concerns and some of them here with me. And I think we all want to learn more about how MSCR fits into our district here, and we kind of neglected them, and that's on us. So I'm sure my buddy Dell out there is going to be happy to know that I'm going to be going to them, maybe even bringing treats. So you'll be hearing more about MSCR this year, and we'll hopefully hear ways where we can expand their services and make them even better than they already are.
All right, Dean, we're looking forward to those exciting MSCR reports coming to the board. So looking forward to it. All right, thanks again. And next item on the agenda, Education Resource Officer, ERO Ad Hoc Committee.
Okay, we also met last week. What we ended up doing was finishing some of our agenda items from the month before, which were largely concept statements from people around their core beliefs around specific items pertaining to EROs in schools or not. Where we've been so far has led us to kind of subdivide our committee into different priority research groups. For an example, we wanted to know the history of EROs or police in schools. They're called different things in different districts. We call them ERO. We're one of the few that do that. So we're going to study that, and we're going to bring that to the group along with several other areas, the history of how they started, compare what other districts do, and also we want to know what districts do that don't have them. Not every district has them. Less than half have schools or police in schools. More school districts do not have schools or police in schools. So that's what we'll be doing at our next meeting, and beginning to have some breakouts with subcommittees and bringing back the information. So that's what we'll be doing. That's where we're at right now.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Dean? All right, thanks. And then we'll continue to move right on. The next item on the agenda is under other business, and it's the renewal of the at-risk plan. And I'll move that the Board of Education renew the plan for student at risk of not graduating with no changes in order to continue with implementation and monitoring for the 17-18 school year. Moved and second. Questions, comments?
I just want to say that I feel a little strange passing this without any discussion, but it's also probably appropriate since we hadn't had something systematic in place prior to this year, and we just are kind of like, at phase one with pulling this together. I appreciate the data we got. It looks like approximately 10% of our students in the target group, grades 5th through 12, are classified as at risk for one reason or another. The data, I would also like to, if we could have a redacted version of the data that we could share, because some of that can't be shared, would be good. And, encourage both the public and the board to continue monitoring what happens with this plan as we go forward. It's kind of too late to say what's happening, too early to say what's happening with it, because it's new. And the final thing I want to kind of highlight from the data I did look at is the relationship between mobility and at-risk status. And I appreciated our data people putting that in there, and I think that needs more exploration and perhaps more response to it. So those would be my comments on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Merks. When reading the report, it sort of reminded me of that commercial, the one that talks about if you're not going to do anything while you're monitoring the problem. So could you talk a little bit about what are we actually going to do with this at-risk data? I mean, it's a very good report, very good data. So what are the next steps? And just could you talk a little bit about what those next steps are? I mean, it seems as though if we're identifying kids that are at risk, then our goal seemingly would be to make them not at risk somehow. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Right. So some of the components we can maybe never make not at risk, because some of them are, a student that is parenting may be one of the factors. So how does that not render a student at risk? But the plan is to do kind of exactly what TJ said, which is, and what Dell has spoken to us about, and that's develop a plan for the student. So it's both running and knowing who the students are. Making contacts with the families, because it's also, as Eden shared with us, right? Relationships matter. So knowing who the kids are, having a relationship with them, and developing a plan to hopefully move them from being at risk to not being at risk of not graduating, while working with the MTSS team and other teams to seamlessly integrate that into other systems that are in place. And those are the kind of lessons that we need to learn, both how to make it a working definition, but then provide individualized plans and supports for students once we know who they are.
And where are we?
We are in the contact phase.
In that process.
We are in the reaching out and making personalized contacts with families, so that it is not a cold call letter that they're getting, but a human contact to advise them that as part of the process you're going to get this letter. Here's why. Here's what we want to do with you to move forward.
Mm-hmm. And I will just add, James, that from seeing the board calendar for the upcoming year, which I know will be finalized at the end of this week, that we have at least a couple of places where we'll talk about some of our most at-risk or disconnected youth, the youth that we believe that despite our best efforts still are not getting their needs met. And Ricardo Hara, the special assistant to the superintendent, will be taking on a special project, trying to get insight into a more narrow group of students who are at risk. We're actually going to use slightly different language when we introduce that to you in the fall, and we're going to begin to put some of that work into action, much of which I think is very aligned to what Dell continually talks to us about, which is this focus on individualization and helping students envision their future goals and helping develop a plan to help them meet those. So not just about programs.
Vice President Moffitt.
Well, what I would just say is early on, and I kind of want to put a plug in here for the budget, because I do think that if we're really looking at creating a comprehensive at-risk plan, that there I would think it would require additional resources, because if we make the individual plan, we have to make sure we can provide those services to the students. And if we're talking about 10% of our student population, it's a lot of students. And so I'm hopeful this won't become a reallocation process, but that we will be investing and making sure that we're providing the right services and supports for these students.
Well, I will, just as long as we're on that topic, remind the board that one of the things we discussed back in the spring was the TID line on innovation, and the extent to which and the process by which we would decide to use some of those funds to try things. And we think this would actually be an excellent opportunity to try some things that could then fold into the base budget in the future.
Mr. Loomis.
Yeah, I can't think of a better example of how building legitimate relationships could pay off than with this group. And again, following some of Dell's really good advice and comments to us over the last year, and particularly around the outreach part, and particularly around the initial outreach, I think that someone who knows how to build relationship with a family and a student, get to the families early on in this process, as I believe what Dylan said is happening, that initial contact, maybe a letter goes out first, but and the letter says, expect a visit real soon, and then within a day or two, the person shows up at the house or contacts, something like that. And I think those types of legitimate relationship building things, as we're trying to talk about throughout the entire school district, will pay off big time if it's done properly in this particular example.
One note also, besides the letter and the personal contact, make sure that we have direct personal contact. I work with juveniles every day who know how to intercept the mail before it is ever delivered, and I just want to make sure it gets there.
Thanks for the suggestion. I think it's a good one. Anyone else? All right, Lori, advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. All right, next item on the agenda, appointment of 2017-18 hearing officers. Whereas the Madison School Board Policy 4045 and the Wisconsin Statute Section 120.137 sub E provide that the Madison School Board, the board, may adopt a resolution in which the board may authorize the use of an independent hearing officer appointed by the board to determine pupil expulsion from school, and whereas such resolution is only effective during the school year it is adopted, and whereas the board desires to adopt such resolution and use independent hearing officers to determine pupil expulsion from school for the 2017-18 school year. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the use of independent hearing officers for the 2017-18 school year to determine a pupil's expulsion from school. And be it further resolved that the following independent hearing examiners shall be appointed to the pool of examiners: Alicia Connolly Laura and David Fryman.
Second.
Is that a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Dean. Discussion, and Ms. Vandermoot.
I've worked a lot on the expulsion issue, both with STEP and then with my short time on the board. And I know we had an expulsion issue earlier this year. Is it possible that we can notify our examiners of certain basic requirements that they must tell everyone, like when you have the right to cross-examine, when you have the right to call witnesses, because not every student is going to have an attorney. They may have a lay advocate, and just so that we can avoid any conflict in the process and keep it consistent.
Hey, Ms. Paula.
So it's both been addressed in that particular issue, but we do an annual training, but we do an annual with two. It's more of a sit-down discussion, and that is part of the agenda, because I think part of it is going back to the basics, because we are doing so few hearings in any year that there is no mental reflexive muscle for kind of anybody at this point. So it's really, we have that planned in our agenda to kind of go back to basics because there are so few.
Thank you.
So it's a good, bad problem to have.
All right, anyone else? Okay, Lori, advise a vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Is there any old or new business to be brought before the board this evening? Seeing none, then I move adjournment. All, Lori, advise a vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye. Kate, can I get a